she wasn't supposed to speak. A 17-year-old girl in a courtroom full of men who'd already decided her father's fate. When the judge laughed, calling her little ghetto girl, the room echoed with mockery until she reached the one thing no one expected, the law itself. Because what began as a daughter's desperate plea for her father's freedom would soon uncover a truth so powerful, it threatened to tear down everything that courthouse stood for. But before the world saw her as a hero, they tried to silence her. She thought the fight was just for her father's name. She didn't know she was about to expose a system built to break them both. Before the courtroom and the cameras, Maya Williams was just a girl with dreams bigger than her small East Cleveland apartment. Her world smelled of her mother's cooking and echoed with her father's laughter after long shifts at the construction site. Every night, their dinner table became a classroom, where her father taught lessons no textbook could offer: strength, dignity, and the quiet power of knowing your worth in a world determined to forget it. Maya's walls weren't covered in celebrity posters, but with Supreme Court cases, Brown versus Board, Miranda versus Arizona, names that whisper of battles fought and freedoms won. She believed in those victories. She believed in justice. She believed the system worked. Until morning, a phone call shattered everything. Her father had been arrested. The man who taught her to stand tall was now handcuffed, accused of a crime that didn't make sense. She thought it was a mistake, just a misunderstanding that would clear itself up. But when she saw the look in the officer's eyes, she realized this wasn't about truth. It was about power. And for the first time, Maya felt what her father had been preparing her for all along: the weight of being black in a world that decides your guilt before you ever speak. She thought she understood injustice. She had no idea how deep it ran. The day after her father's arrest, Maya's world collapsed into police reports, court summons, and whispers that followed her through school hallways. Teachers avoided her eyes. Friends who once admired her now looked at her with quiet suspicion. Construction fight, white supervisor, black worker. That was all anyone needed to hear. At the courthouse, Maya watched her father shuffled in, wrist-bound, head lowered beneath fluorescent lights that made him look smaller, older. The judge barely looked up. The public defender spoke fast, detached, recommending a plea deal before the first piece of evidence was even mentioned. Maya's heart pounded with disbelief. No one cared about the truth. Her father's life had been reduced to a statistic. Another black man in an orange jumpsuit. That night, she couldn't sleep. Her father's voice echoed in her head. Knowledge is the one thing they can't take from us. So she began digging. At first, it was just curiosity, but the deeper she searched, the more horrifying the truth became. The judge overseeing her father's case, Harold Richardson, had a record drenched in bias. Black defendants receiving sentences nearly 4 times harsher than white offenders for the same crimes. Maya printed case after case, her walls filling with evidence until they looked like a detective's board. Each page screamed injustice. Each number felt like a wound. Yet, when she brought her findings to her father's lawyer, he waved her off. "Sweetheart, that's not how the system works." But Maya wasn't a child anymore. The system had already taught her too much. She started spending her days in the library, devouring criminal codes, precedent cases, trial transcripts. Librarians whisper about the teenage girl who studied like someone's life depended on it. Because it did. Weeks passed, her mother's eyes hollowing from worry, her grades slipping, her friends fading away. Still, Maya pressed on, chasing a truth everyone else had abandoned. And then came the discovery that changed everything: an obscure Ohio statute allowing a defendant's family member to assist in court if counsel was deemed inadequate. A small, overlooked law, but in Maya's hands, it became a weapon. She memorized it, printed it, and mapped out how to use it. But knowing the law wasn't enough. She needed proof of her father's innocence. When she learned about a missing construction site video, supposedly lost due to technical issues, something in her snapped. Someone had hidden the truth, and if she could find it, she could save him. Days later, after tracking down a reluctant security guard, Maya found herself in a dim office staring at grainy footage. Her heart nearly stopped. There on the screen, her father stood calmly as his supervisor shoved him first, again and again, before losing balance and falling into a stack of metal rods. Self-defense. Clear as daylight. But there was something else. The name on the office wall, Morrison Construction, owned by the judge's brother-in-law. The system wasn't just broken. It was rigged. Maya clutched a USB drive to her chest, shaking with equal parts fear and fury. She had the truth, but truth alone wasn't safe in a world that punished those who spoke it. The closer she got to justice, the more dangerous it became. But Maya was done being quiet. She was done waiting for permission to fight back. The next time she stepped into that courtroom, she wouldn't just be a daughter. She'd be her father's defender. She thought she was walking into a courtroom to save her father's life, but what she was about to do would shake the foundation of that entire system. The courtroom was packed, the air thick with tension and disbelief. Cameras flashed as Maya Williams, a 17-year-old girl in a borrowed blazer and trembling hands, stood before Judge Richardson, invoking a law most attorneys have forgotten even existed. Reporters whispered, jurors shifted uneasily, and her father sat beside her, his wrists still marked by handcuffs. Richardson smirked from a bench, his voice dripping with condescension as he called her child and questioned her right to speak. But Maya didn't flinch. Every word she spoke was measured, deliberate, and burning with conviction. She laid out her case like a seasoned attorney, walking the court through every piece of evidence, every pattern of bias, every ignored testimony, every number that proved this judge's courtroom was a pipeline for injustice. The prosecutor interrupted, objecting to her presence, but Maya countered with citation from People versus Sharp, her voice steady even as her heart thundered. The crowd murmured. For the first time, Richardson looked uncertain. Then Maya produced a USB drive, the footage no one was supposed to see. The moment it played, the courtroom fell silent. On screen, her father stood calmly as the supervisor struck first. The second push, the fall, the blood, it was all there. Gasps rippled through the audience. The prosecutor's face drained of color. Judge Richardson slammed his gavel, demanding the video be dismissed, calling it inadmissible. But Maya was ready. Under Ohio Code 841.2, she reminded him, a defendant may present new evidence if prior counsel failed to do so. The gallery erupted in whispers. Richardson's mask cracked, his control slipping. Then came the final blow. Maya revealed the connection between the judge and construction company, the contracts, the favoritism, the motive. Each fact landed like a hammer on the judge's reputation. The room exploded with chaos. Reporters scribbled furiously. The prosecutor shouted objections, and Richardson's voice shook as he tried to restore order. But it was too late. The truth was out. In that moment, Maya wasn't just defending her father. She was exposing an entire system built to keep families like hers in chains. Tears streamed down Marcus's face as he watched his daughter dismantle the power that had once seemed untouchable. Security guards shifted, unsure of whose orders to follow. Every eye turned to Richardson, the man who'd mocked her as little ghetto girl, now cornered by the very law he claimed to serve. For the first time in his courtroom, the balance of power had shifted, and it was in the hands of the one person he'd underestimated most. Maya stood tall, her voice breaking but unwavering, declaring, "This court may try to silence me, but the truth doesn't need permission to be heard." The room went still. The judge's gavel fell with a thunderous crack, echoing like the sound of something breaking. Perhaps his authority, perhaps his illusion of control. Either way, nothing in that courtroom would ever be the same again. But what came after that gavel struck would prove that exposing the truth was only half the battle, and the fight for real justice had just begun. The courtroom fell silent after the gavel's echo faded, but the silence felt different this time. Not the silence of fear, but of reckoning. The following hours blurred together in chaos. Legal motions filed, reporters swarming, the video spreading across every major network. Within days, Judge Richardson was placed under investigation, his record dissected line by line. The statistics Maya had uncovered became evidence in a broader probe into systemic bias within the county's courts. And her father, Marcus Williams, walked out of jail a free man, his name cleared, his dignity restored. But freedom didn't erase the scars. Marcus carried the memory of every night spent behind bars for a crime he didn't commit, every moment of being treated as less than human. Maya, once a quiet honor student, became a symbol, a headline, a hashtag, a movement. People called her the girl who beat the system. But she knew better. The system hadn't been beaten. It had simply been exposed. Because for every Maya who found a loophole, there were hundreds of families who couldn't. For every victory, countless others still waited for justice that might never come. In interviews, Maya never smiled when asked how it felt to win. "It shouldn't take a child to fix what adults keep breaking," she said. Those words rippled through communities, through classrooms, through living rooms across America. The story of a 17-year-old girl who stood up to a corrupt judge became a rallying cry for reform, inspiring petitions, protests, and the quiet, unseen courage of others who refused to stay silent. Yet, even as the headlines faded, Maya's mission didn't. She went on to study law, not for prestige or power, but to make sure no one else would have to learn the law out of desperation. Her father often said that knowledge was the one thing they couldn't take from you. But Maya had proven something more. Knowledge, when wielded with courage, could take down even the people who thought they owned justice. Still, as she stood years later on the courthouse steps where it all began, she couldn't help but wonder how many others were still trapped in the same system, unseen, unheard, unprotected? How many more families were being silenced by the same bias that almost destroyed hers? Her story wasn't just about winning a case. It was about exposing a truth too many choose to ignore. Because racism doesn't always wear a badge or shout slurs. Sometimes it wears a robe and calls itself honorable. The fight Maya started didn't end with her father's freedom. It began there. And now it belongs to all of us. So ask yourself, when justice depends on who's sitting in the courtroom, not on the truth being told, what will it take for the world to finally change?